So I went to the hospital every day. She was there. I was there for a week, and I just, visited with her. And she wasn't doing that great, but she was pretty upbeat. She thought she was going to be okay. And so anyway, after that, I kind of went back to my job, went back to Utah, and I was hanging out. And probably another month went by, and I got a call. And it was one of my older sisters, but this time, my sister was crying really hard. I wasn't sure which one it was. She was crying and crying, and she just said, "Dario, Mom's died." And so after I heard that, I got in touch with work, and I started driving back. And I got back there and met my brothers and sisters, and my mom had remarried, and her husband, Willard, was there. And so we planned her funeral and put it together, and then we buried our mom. And after that, we decided, my siblings and I, to stay there a couple days longer and just visit, because we hadn't seen each other for a long time. And so we were there telling funny stories about my mom, and she was kind of a crazy lady, and saying how crazy she was, and mostly kind of comforting each other, because it was pretty tough on all of us when that happened. And but then it was time for me to go. So I had packed up my car. I was getting ready to leave. And right at that moment, I realized that I had just grown up. I was not a kid anymore. I was 20 years old, and I had just lost my second parent. And when you lose your second one, you don't have that person to talk to or call or get advice or go home. That's gone. So I knew after that, every decision I made was up to me. It was my decision. And same thing, right at that moment, I realized, and I said, you know what? Seeing both my parents die at a young age, for the next 35 years, I'm going to have as much fun as I can. And so I did. I actually did. I went back, I worked at ski areas, I became a river guide, I did incredible mountaineering trips, I did incredible desert trips, I traveled a bunch. I just had an incredible, really fun time. And I'm still having fun. And I still live out west here. And the one thing that was true, my mom said I'd never go back there, and I never did. And anyway, thank you for listening to my story.
I steal a few breaths from the world for a minute, and then
Hello again. So next up, the poem, or the story, is called Bread, Bread, Bread by Aubrey May. Aubrey May telling us a story about how one piece of bread changed their life forever.
it's always been just him and me together. So I bet all I have on that
I was 19 when I moved to New York City for the summer. Seeking adventure, I packed a big bag and I flew across the country to a land of strangers. And for those 3 months, I had a lot of fun. I met a lot of new people, explored this new place, went out a lot, maybe drank a little bit too much. But this is not all a pleasant coming-of-age story, though a coming-of-age story nonetheless. You see, I am a dirt person, and I was in a city without the good kind of dirt. I'm a mountains person in a city of no mountains. I'm a forest person in a city of no forests. So all of that, in combination with some common afflictions of a 19-year-old, an identity crisis, an abusive relationship, and very poor coping skills, I started to struggle. And one of the ways I chose to gain control was through food and my body. And I began to restrict, I overexercised, I was punishing myself. And soon I developed a pretty gnarly eating disorder, one that began to take over my life. When I went back to school in the fall, one of the guises my eating disorder took was the keto diet. If you've never heard of keto, you've been living under a rock. But it's a high-fat, low-carb diet, and it was initially developed as a treatment for epilepsy and was actually really successful in helping folks with that disorder and some other autoimmune issues as well. However, keto was hijacked by the wellness industry and by diet culture and is now peddled as a healthy way to lose weight fast. When you don't eat carbs, your body goes into ketosis, which is a metabolic adaptation that allows the body to survive times of famine. But it's not meant to be done long term, and for some, like it did for me, it can have serious health consequences physically and mentally. Under the keto diet, you're allowed 20 grams of carbs a day. Want to know what 20 grams of carbs look like? Okay, it looks like one banana or a half a cup of white rice. It looks like 2 plums or 1 apple. And so for 8 months, I ate nearly no fruit. I ate no bread, no grains, and even some vegetables were off limits due to their high sugars content. For 8 months, I was constantly saying no to offers of food from family and friends, like that one Thanksgiving where my plate was only meat, devoid of all my favorite family treats. And for 8 months, I was constantly justifying myself in the diet to faces of confusion and disbelief, much like the ones I'm seeing right now. See, when you don't eat carbs, your body loses hunger cues. And though seemingly insignificant or perhaps even annoying, hunger cues are really important. And losing them, for me, was concerning. I would forget to eat, or food became a chore, and eating became less and less enjoyable. And when there's no hunger, there's also no satisfaction and no fullness. And so for me, food turned this dull gray, and in turn, so did life. And in that dull gray lives depression. No excitement or things to look forward to, no hungers or drives to seek out pleasure. About 7 months into my time on keto, I was hired to be a resident assistant for one of the dorms at my college campus. So one cold winter evening, all 6 of us shuffle into our director, Luke's, tiny apartment to have our first staff meeting. We squeeze next to each other on some cheap old couches, and we begin. A few minutes in, the timer on Luke's phone goes off, and he pauses mid-sentence and attends to the timer, rushes into the kitchen to look at something in the oven. "Oh, I forgot to tell you guys," he remarks over his shoulder, "I baked you a loaf of sourdough bread." And we looked at each other with some smiles and murmurs of appreciation, but in my head, the alarm bells, those which I had gone to know so well, began to go off at a deafening volume. "Oh, God, you can't eat that. If you do, how much you're going to have to run to work it off. You're going to have to explain yourself to all these new people." But as I begin to spiral, Luke hands me a jar of honey and a jar of butter and asks me to mix the two together. Okay, 1 tablespoon of honey is 17 grams of carbs, and you already had banana today, so you definitely can't eat that. But as I began to mix the two, the butter doubles in size. It is this sunrise golden yellow. It's whipped into perfection. Luke pulls the loaf out of the oven. The crust is littered with tiny flour-dusted bubbles in perfect proportion. And breaking sourdough etiquette, he begins to cut into the loaf right away. Huge, generous slices billowing with steam. He hands out small, mismatched, and well-loved plates. And I take a plate. And I take a slice. And I slather the honey butter on every square inch. And I'm anxious. These strangers can tell this is the first bread I've touched in months. And I'm practicing the speech of shame I'm going to give myself later. But I take my slice and I sit down on those cheap old couches and I take a bite. And that swirling, ridiculous mess finally quiets and my senses are on high alert. Down the bridge of my nose, I see a field of golden butter. The weight of the sponge is heavy in my hand. The sound of the crust sings like Pavarotti, and the smells mix together in perfect harmony. And the taste. Oh my God, the taste! What had been that dull gray suddenly flashed with color for the first time in months. Sweet and sour and salty just imbued my life, and I felt like Dorothy wandering around Oz for the first time. And that's when I knew that what I'd been doing to myself, the obsession, the restriction, the control, was killing me, and it needed to stop. And that's when I knew that life is too short to not eat bread. And it's all just so reliably difficult. Why deny ourselves the joys and pleasures of ordinary living? I choose to tell you this because I know so many of us in this room, in this country, in this world struggle with food, with our bodies. And for some, one piece of bread is a huge challenge and a joyous victory, like it was for me that day. But that piece of bread took courage. And after that evening, I began the long and difficult road of recovery, one that I'm still on today. But along that road, again and again, I did the courageous thing. I treated myself well, and I ate bread. Bread. Bread.
So next one up is Terry Kennan, and his story is These 5 Things, telling us a story about horses, wild country, and the things he knows about life.
But you're doing well. I mean, you're not dead. So let's celebrate while we still can. I know what they said. I could give a care. They talk so much on me. I must be doing something right. I saw my son today in the likeness of a full-grown man. So I'll celebrate while I still can.
How about now? How about now? Oh, okay. Okay. There's a blinding white light right in my eye. Anyway, about 30 years ago, I had a friend of mine named Bigfoot, and he wanted to ride horses from Riverton, Wyoming to an opal mine he knew about in Spencer, Idaho. He wanted to know if I wanted to come along with him, so it sounded like fun to me because I grew up riding horses. My uncles were horse trainers, so I said yeah, and so we took off from Riverton, and we were heading across Wyoming, and along the way we ran into this cow camp, and it was this guy about my age, and he had 6 sons. And they were running 2,000 head of cattle up in the Tetons, free range. And so we spent the night, and I was talking with the dad all night, and it was a good conversation. It was deep. It was very enjoyable for both of us. And then got up in the morning, and then started heading back toward Idaho. And then about 4 years later, I was driving through Wyoming, so I stopped by to say hi. And while I was there, they asked me if I wanted to work for them for the season, just riding horses and yelling at cows and other things. And I said, sure, it sounded fun. So there was something really glaringly different about all 7 of them, and from anybody I'd ever met, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was that was so different. And then one day we were racing these horses, me and the 2 youngest kids, they were 10 and 12, and we were racing these horses across this 10,000-foot plain up in the Tetons. We were trying to get home before dark. And about that time, it started raining. And it was a cold rain, and we had to slow the horses down to a walk so they wouldn't slip in the mud. So then it turned dark pretty quick after that, and then this lightning started coming down all around us, like, and it was, you could see it real clear because there wasn't nothing to obstruct the view, and the crack was really loud, and the thunder was really loud, and the rain was really cold, and it was really dark. And so anyway, so the youngest kid goes, well, keep the horses off the rocks because they got those steel shoes, and that'll make a spark, and that'll attract lightning, And I said, nah. I said, that don't attract lightning. I said, tall stuff attracts lightning. Where's the tall stuff out here, man? And so, then it got real quiet, So, you realize, there's nothing you can do, You get hit by lightning, you get hit by lightning. All you can do is just keep walking in the dark and the rain. So you pray, to whoever you think will work at that particular time, which is what I did. And then I started singing this song, the refrain to this song that I knew, and just kept singing it over and over again until we got home. And so I was just going, sure don't know what I'm going for, but I'm going to go for it for sure. Sure don't know what I'm going for, but I'm going to go for it for sure. And it puts you in a trance, and it makes the ride more calm, And so anyway, so we got home, and the dad came out, to greet us, and he's like, I was praying for you. And I'm like, yeah, it was really scary. And he goes, yeah, I know, I've been out there, and it is scary. So we went to bed, and then in the middle of the night, I had to go to the bathroom, and it was a 100-year-old log cabin with a sod roof, and so, you go outside. So I was standing out there looking at the stars, and then it hit me, what made them different from anybody that I had normally met. And there were 5 things that made them different. And the first thing that made them different was they knew they were on a small planet in space. Because every time you go out at night, you're 10,000 feet up, there was no light, there was no smog. The universe was right there, it couldn't be denied. So, you got a real good picture of the actual neighborhood that you're in, not Colorado or Tennessee or wherever, It's a small planet in space. And so they knew that. The other thing that made them different was that they were always in the moment, because when you deal with big animals, if you daydream, you can get really seriously hurt. So wherever they were right there all the time. And the third thing I noticed that made them different from other people was that they knew they were in paradise, because where we were, there wasn't anybody out there, so it was really pristine, pretty pristine. And, you could drink out of the river, stuff like that. So they knew that they lived in a magical, wondrous paradise. The fourth thing I realized that made them different was that they knew they were going to die, because there's all kinds of dead bodies laying around up there, like skeletons of different animals that either get killed or die of old age or, get caught in the mud bog or something like that. So, you're always confronted with the mortality of everything, which includes you. So they really appreciated the time they had while they were down here, and they, made the most of it. And then the fifth thing that I noticed made them different from other people was that they knew there was stuff they couldn't control, like the lightning storm. If you get hit, you get hit. So they didn't even try. They didn't even worry about it, because you couldn't control it anyway. So, why bother? And it's just so glaringly different from, people who didn't realize they were on a planet in space, people who weren't in the moment, people who didn't realize they were in paradise, people who thought they were going to live forever, and people who tried to control everything. And, it makes a really big difference how you live and how you see your surroundings. And the Cowboys were a lot more fun to be with. I mean, a lot less tense.
Morning in July, got a suit-up motor on the county line.
Thank you, Terry. That was great. Next up, woo! Next up is wait, no, that's not the right one. Time to Go by Seamus Dignan. A story about how sandwiches and addiction let him know it was time to leave.
I think it's rock and roll. It's great. Sorry, Jess. I ran a program feeding the homeless back home in Portland, Oregon. And it was the very best and the very worst thing that I ever did. Now, it started with a snowstorm. I had been working for a couple other people's programs, volunteering for a while. And the snow started coming down, and I had friends on the street. And nobody's ready for snow in Portland. We get 1 or 2 good snows a year. And so when that shit comes down, people die. And I had buddies. So I started clearing out Goodwill blanket shelves and whatnot, and I let all my friends, family, loose acquaintances know that any sleeping bags, sweaters, tents, tarps, jackets they had, if they bagged them up, threw them on their front porch, I'd come pick them up. Now, it turns out I have a lot of friends, family, and loose acquaintances because I was running that town from west 137th, 187th to east 68th all day, every day, for 4 days. I filled up that pickup and I emptied it, filled up that pickup and I emptied it. And people kept giving me gas money. Now, this was 2021 or something, 2020, I don't remember. Gas was cheap, and I didn't need all that money. And I ended up on that Sunday morning thaw with $300 in my pocket. And I wasn't just gonna pocket it, so I made sandwiches. I'm a cook, that's all I've ever done. So I put some sandwiches together and I hit the street and I let people know, if you want give me more money, I'll make more sandwiches. And they kept giving me money, so I kept having to make sandwiches. And that was how I lived. I mean, I never made $1 off of it, so I had to work full time. But I could lend 3 days out of my week to it, because I was working 3 doubles a week. So Tuesday, I'd get all my shit together, supplies and whatnot. Wednesday, I would spend the whole day, I'd get all this raw meat, and I would spend the day roasting 50 pounds of pork butt and beef top round in my little studio apartment. And it was summer, dude. It was like 90 degrees outside, let alone in that little sucker. And so I'm baked, and I smell like meat. But Nevertheless, I had 250 sandwiches to make, and all I had was social skills and a dream. So I'd stumble on down to the bar, find some local barfly who was drunk, but not too drunk, so he could still get up. And I'd be like, hey, man, you want to make a difference in your community? And yeah, that was how I got my recruits. And so we'd spend the whole day till about 7 p.m. making sandwiches with people that half the time I didn't even like. And come 7, I'd load up my truck and I'd hit the street. And I'd always go alone. I didn't take people to this place. And so I'd go down to Chinatown. Now, Chinatown is called Chinatown, but there's nothing Chinese about it except for the Dragon Gate and a couple triad fronts on 4th Street. Chinatown's a neighborhood with a well-earned reputation of burgeoning homeless population, open-air drug markets, and the sound of gunshots filling the air the way that the chirp of crickets would on an Alabama creek bed. And there I was, on 6th and Davis, on the corner. I had a pickup truck full of sandwiches, bag full of tobacco, and I was just handing them fuckers out, rolling cigarettes for all my buddies that would pass by. And I was shooting the shit with my buddy Sarge. Now, Sarge lived on that corner, has for 2 years, because he's an upstanding citizen and doesn't let people shoot up behind the dumpster on that corner. And let me tell you, of all the hungry, hungry souls that I know, sleeping rough on Chinatown's pavement, living in tents on the corners, Sarge is, was, and always will be my very favorite. Now, he's somebody I call a sidewalk sage. When you have enough people of a similar ilk living in a similar place, a society is created, whether you like it or not. And in societies, there are practices, there are systems. And my favorite of these practices is one of old heads like Sarge, taking care of, advising, providing for the newcomers, the youngsters, the wayward young souls that didn't know what the fuck they were doing, and didn't even know how to get a meal, let alone how to not get knifed. And that was how he spent his days. Just taking care of people, advising them, feeding them. And let me tell you, it took me a very long time to realize that I was one of these wayward youngsters that he took care of. And on top of that, Sarge was a gifted street fighter. Now, I watched this man work. He was prodigious. He was vicious, yet merciful at the same time. There's nobody that I'm more afraid of, but at the same time, there's nobody I'd rather have beat my ass, because I know he'd stop when time came. And in the congruence of these two occupations of his, Sarge was giving me advice, fighting advice. And he sits there, and he's in the lotus position, and he's got a joint hanging out of his mouth, and he goes, No, I'm serious. Some big motherfucker backs you into a wall, doesn't matter. Take your foot, plant it against the wall, get low, get straight for him, get inside that wingspan, hit him on the uppercut, knock him on the jaw, take him for the throat, take a bite out of his fucking belly fat. Doesn't matter. Big motherfucker like that, you get inside his wingspan, keep moving, you'll be all right. Now, I am not a fighter. So I just nodded, and I was like, you got it. Knowing damn well I'd never do some crazy shit like that. But he looks at me, and he says, you got good sandwiches, little brother, you do. You're not lying when you say they're the best in Chinatown. That'll keep you safe most days, it will. But sometimes, you just gotta go for the fucking throat. I was like, all right, that's fair. And this is about the time that a woman came walking around the corner. Now, she was wrapped in one of those government issue wool disaster blankets, the ones that Unicorn makes in federal prison. It's quite possible I gave her that blanket, but I don't remember. And she's got this stiff, broken-hearted shuffle, the kind that only an addict can earn by sleepless nights, skip meals, and counterfeit, brain rot methamphetamine. Now, I didn't know her. I'd never even seen her before. But Sarge did. And true to his nature, when she arrives, he looks up at her and he says, what can I do for you? What do you need? I asked her if she wanted a sandwich. She ignored me. And she leaned in to Sarge's ear and starts whispering. Now, I didn't know what she said. I didn't hear it, but I knew what she was asking for. And he just tilts his head back and he He shakes his head and he says, "That I do not have." And she got to walking. No goodbye, no sorry, no nothing. You know, some people may perceive it as rudeness, but the reality is that an addict of her caliber is living on a clock, always. You get high, you reset the clock, countdown starts again. And by the look of her, she had 2-3 hours before shit got really ugly. So I didn't blame her for walking off. Now, this I will never forget. I will die with this memory because Sarge looks and he points at her and he says, "That, little brother, that is what you call a walking shadow." You know, it only took her 1 year, to fall right off the edge of the fucking world. Before that, you know, her and I, we used to sit at the mission, we'd drink our coffee, eat food, we'd talk about our lives, our hopes, our dreams, talk about the children we were, the adults we'd become. We would talk about people we loved. And now look at her. Walking shadow, crying shame. Fuck was all I could muster to say. Now, I had been working with the homeless for 2 years now, and it was taking a toll on me that I was refusing to recognize. See, I was a young kid. I didn't know what I was getting into. I wanted to be strong. I wanted to be steadfast, resilient, reliable. I wanted God to be proud of me. But I wasn't as strong as I thought I was. See, my reality was that I was surrounded by death and suffering, desperately trying to make it better, knowing damn well I wouldn't, but I wouldn't admit that. So I just wasn't taking care of myself. I was drinking hard, hardly eating. And it was coming to dawn on me that I wouldn't be able to do it for much longer. There was a revelation of powerlessness starting to drift in behind my eyes like a storm front, you know. And it was on the horizon, but it wasn't raining yet. And I wasn't willing to admit that I couldn't do it anymore, and I had fucking 200 sandwiches left. The sun was going down, and I had a long night ahead of me. So I hopped up, did my best to forget that woman, and I looked at Sarge and I told him goodbye. I told him I loved him. And I hopped up in that pickup and I left. And I ran the tent lines up 6th Street, down 5th Street, up 4th Street. Every tent line, same spiel. "Hey man, you hungry? I got sandwiches. Roasted pork shoulder, beef top round. Best sandwiches in Chinatown. Hey man, you hungry? I got sandwiches. Roasted pork shoulder, beef top round. Best sandwiches in Chinatown. Hey man, you hungry? I got sandwiches. Roasted pork shoulder, beef top round. Best sandwiches in Chinatown." And it went all right. I dropped about 100 of them. No incidents, which is great. And then I wound up back on Davis Street, corner of 4th, and hop up on my pickup, I walk over to the tent line, and I hear some hollering, yelling, shouting, a few people. You know, some of it sounded angry, some of it taunting, all of it growing closer. And I look, and around this corner comes this old boy in full sprint, big-ass gash under his eye. And I looked into that eye of his, and I saw this old boy was running for his life. Now, I didn't know him. I had seen him around, but I didn't know him. Maybe I'd give him a sandwich or two. But I knew the 6 fellas that came barreling after him. Hell, I fed half of them. And they're just tearing after him. And this old boy, this poor, pitiful fool, stops, turns around, and tries to reason with them. Now, of course, he didn't get a word out before Melvin, a dealer who would occasionally donate to my program, clipped him on the cheekbone with a thunderous right cross. Thunderous. And he went tumbling. He ends up flat on his back, and they're hitting him, hammering him, going to work. Ribs, trachea, skull. And I watched. You know, I thought about hollering something, you know, appealing to my station in the neighborhood, maybe whatever good nature they had left, but I didn't. See, that storm front, that feeling of powerlessness had finally come up top, and it was getting to rain, and I realized that I could help, but I could not save. I could make a man's life better, but I could not decide his fate. If it weren't today, it'd be tomorrow. If it weren't him, it'd be me. So I watched. I don't feel good about that. I don't even feel at peace with it. In fact, it broke my fucking heart. But it's the truth. That's supposed to count for something. And I watched as they're beating it. It missed a beat. And they gave him one second of reprieve, and he hops right the fuck up like a deer with a bullet in his gut, doesn't know it yet. And he tears off, scampers around that corner, gone. And these fellas, they tear on after him, nipping at his heels like a pack of fucking dogs. And I went back to handing out my sandwiches. Hey man, I got sandwiches, roasted pork shoulder, beef top round, best sandwiches in Chinatown. Again and again and again. That was a long night. And I kept handing out sandwiches for 3 months after. But it was after that day that I understood that this had to end. I couldn't handle it anymore. I wasn't ready. And in those months that followed, I'd see those fellows around. I'd say hi to Melvin every time I saw him. I still fed him. But I never saw that old boy again.
Thank you, Seamus, for that deeply extraordinary story of yours. It is intermission now, so come back in 20-ish minutes.
Don't forget fishbowl notes over there if you want to add in your big dreams over there. Thank you.
Just you and I, having a good time. We get wise when we roll. Get slow when we go. Just you and I, having a good time. Do you know? Here we go. That's life. If we have more time, we can live forever. Just you and I, we can be together. That's life. If we have more time, we can live forever. Just you and I, we can be together. That's life. We can buy my children right. We can tie my children tight. Just you and I, having a good time. Make a plan for when we old. Reminisce when we get old. Just you and I, having a good time. If you're gonna tell them everything, tell them I'm a good kisser. Tell them all the things you told me in your desperate whisper. If you're gonna tell them everything, don't leave out the good part. Tell them the way that you broke my heart when you told me that you missed her. Tell them I'm a good kisser. Tell them I'm a good kisser. You know I'm not proud of the thing that we did. Did it work out just the way that you wanted it? After it all, I stood up tall. I kept my mouth shut so you wouldn't fall. Now everybody's talking about me, 'cause you were dirty me up just to get yourself clean. Get yourself clean. If you're gonna tell them everything, tell them I'm a good kisser.
Intermission still happening. Just a quick announcement to our other sponsors of tonight. Shout out to Howell Mercantile, Salida Books, Amika's, 7,000 Feet Running Company, and Firehouse Liquors. So thank you to our other sponsors. Also, please fill out a prompt for the fishbowl and the bulletin board. So go get creative.
Tell 'em I'm a good. Tell 'em I'm a good kisser. Should I have been wasting my time on you at all? No, no, no. Should I have seen the bad writing on the wall? But I've still got time. You've got your story, and you know I've got mine. Tell 'em I'm a good kisser. 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 Tell 'em I'm a good. I'm good. Tell 'em I'm a good kisser. Tell 'em I'm a good. Tell 'em I'm a good. Tell 'em I'm a good kisser.
Okay, I'm back. I forgot to say what the prompt was. So, this is our lovely fishbowl, and the prompt is, what do you daydream about? So, time is ticking, write what you daydream about, and we're gonna read them out loud before Act 2. So, it'll be fun. Okay, that's what I was supposed to say.
But all the praying just ain't helping at all. shoot and aim for someone else's brain. You claim the insane and aim to stay in time for falling prey to crime. I say the system got you addicted to your own mind. Dreams are hopeless aspirations and hopes are coming true. Believe in yourself, the rest is up to me. Yeah. Go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the rivers and the lakes that you used to. I know that you're gonna have it your way or nothing at all, but I think you're moving too fast. Go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the rivers and the lakes that you used to.
Voila. Voila. Yeah. I'm only coming out to play. Nothing more that I hate in this life. The wrong impression. I only have one to make. You can open your palm, waiting to catch a break. The cards will fall where they may. And what about me? I believe in fate. Huh. They wanna know where I'll be in 5. Huh. But what about today? What about tonight? Only one at a time. So precious. It's yours, it's mine. Only one at a time. My life, yeah. Am I wrong to assume if she can't dance, then she can't ooh? Yeah. Am I wrong to say if she can't dance, then she can't ooh? Hey, I never wanna waste your time. My life, so precious. Is yours, is mine. And look at the time. My God, so precious. Is yours, is mine. Only one at a time. So precious. Is yours, is mine. Only one at a time. My life, yeah.
Spells around the clock, dance around the globe, disco 54. I stare at you in the eyes, spin you on your toes. Music and music without soul. Filling the top rows, shot the blindfolds, pass the nitro, rock the love boat, get high to get low, chill the Merlot, step in your fast mode, you pick up, we gon' go. Make love once more, we rest and encore. Do that, hey. Break you off and you pick that cat, hey. Never seen no one this gorgeous. Pay your whole damn mortgage. But when you look at the time, hey, still you the one on the mind, hey. Still you the topic of prime, hey. Thank God that it's Friday, tonight let's be the life of the party. It's nothing to me, get up and move your feet.
I never wanna waste your time. My life, so precious. Is yours, is mine. And look at the time. My God, so precious. Is yours, is mine. like the wind blowing through your hair. Come on, roll with me till the sun goes down. Texas sun. Say you wanna hit the highway while the engine roars. Come on, roll with me till the sun goes down. Texas sun. Texas sun, caressing you from Fort Worth to Amarillo. Come on, roll with me till the sun dips low. Texas sun. Texas sun, oh girl. Texas sun. When I'm far from home and the cold winds blow, stuck out somewhere, folks at home. 'Cause you keep me nice and you keep me warm. Wanna feel you on me, can't wait to get back there again. Texas sun. Texas sun. Texas sun. Texas sun. You say you like the wind blowing through your hair. Come on, roll with me till the sun goes down. Texas sun. Texas sun. Oh, baby, you're so gorgeous. How about you and me? Take a little trip. Your big body. Take a ride with me, babe. You by my side. How does it sound? You and I. Oh, girl. Take a ride with me, babe. You by my side. How does it sound? You and I. Baby.
Makes me
everybody kind of head back in, find their seats. Hi, guys. So, hi. Thank you. I want to just kind of echo what I think a lot of people are thinking and feeling. And I want to say that, you know, it's really easy to stay home and get in your pajamas or stay in your sweatpants and watch Netflix or something else, whatever you're doing or watching. And it gets to be really, really comfortable, right? And I think that especially in the last few years with COVID, and we're trying to be careful, and there's this sense of like, maybe we should all just stay home, and it drives this sense of isolation. And the more that we do that, sometimes the further down into our little bubbles of, this is who I am, and this is what I know, and these are the people I know, and this is what I think. And by having the courage to put pants on and come out, we learn something. We learn something about other people in our community. We learn something about ourselves. And so I just really want each one of you to give yourself a round of applause for getting in your pants or your skirts and coming. So thank you, because it really takes people showing up to make something happen. And a church we've been here for about 4 or 5 years, and it was created with the intention of connecting people. And that has taken a little bit of a COVID halt, and here we are again, and it feels really, really good to see that happening. So thank you. Like Kurt said earlier, we are a church. We have a belief in the power of community to create positive change. That only happens when community shows up. So if you aren't on our email list, please consider putting your name on there and see all the other cool stuff that we have going on. We support a lot of other local nonprofits like Latinos Unidos, Chafee Equity, the Community Equity Coalition, Salida Library, the Area Agency on Aging, Tents, which is theater in non-traditional spaces. We just have a lot of really beautiful things that happen in this space. And all of those things are, again, connecting us. This has been a really divisive time in our country, and it's hard. I think that our job as individuals is just to try to figure out how we can be less divided and more connected. And so as we move forward, I really believe that we each have the power every day to see the world with new eyes, to reach across whatever aisle that is, and just to be our best selves. And Salida, I particularly believe, is a really special space. So, as a nonprofit, we do need members, we need support, we need financial help to support our programming, our incredible manager, Andrea, who makes all of this possible. Thank you, Andrea, because we couldn't do it without that. So we have a table back there. If you can contribute, you get an apple on our beautiful giving tree. And that's for businesses as well as individuals. There's a lot of different opportunities to participate. If you have an idea of something you would love to see happen in this space, please consider it community space. We are open to hearing what other people want to bring to the area as well. So without further ado, I would like to bring Sydney back up to stage and Andrea as well. Thank you.
And 3 more ducklings.
Thanks again for coming out to the second ever Salida Moth. Andrea and I organized this back our first one was April 3rd. And while I'm done with my AmeriCorps service in a few months, I think this could be a thing for, the years to come. So, yeah, that'll be exciting.
Looking for volunteers for help?
Oh, yeah, if you want to kind of fill my shoes and volunteer at K-Hen, you could be the next Mother organizer. So, who knows? What else? Oh, another sponsor shout out. So we have our top tier sponsors, Integrity Tattoo, Highside, Peak Solar Designs, and Soul Craft. And we also have Howell Mercantile, Salida Books, Amika's 7,000 Feet Running Company, and Firehouse Liquors in Poncha Springs.
Thank you.
I'll take the floor for a second. My name is Rick White. I'm a DJ for K-Hen, your local community radio station.
Rick, what's your radio show called?
Oh, I have a radio show Monday afternoons from 4 to 6. It's called Bacon, Lubbock, Tomato Sandwich. Any questions on that? I'm at the information booth. I just want to put out a quick thank you to Dario Carlos, Aubrey May, Terry Kinnan, and Seamus Digman. Thank you very much. What's that? Seamus. It's spelled Seamus, but it's said Seamus. Thank you, Seamus.
It's Irish.
Okay.
So we have
So-
her. Yeah.
I'm going to go first.
This is from Fishbowl Notes. The prompt is, what do you daydream about?
Oh, one of my favorites for sure. Food.
You gonna do one, Sydney?
Vanquishing evil.
Great. Jesse? Oh,
Other planets.
I'll jump in on this. Salamanders, shiny seashells, and succulents, and love.
Okay, turbo round.
Yes?
Turbo round.
Go fast.
Really having community.
Changing the world with art.
Botswana?
Chuck! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Chuck!
Smiley face.
Someone's daydreaming about you.
This is a little embarrassing. I dream of Rick White.
And that's going to be our stopping point.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Sydney.
Okay. And next up, the magical number one, Chris Hostetler. Hostetler? Chris Hotstetler. Wait. Telling her story about burning down the house and magically rebuilding this on the same foundation.
That's right. If we had more time, we could live forever. Just you and
I want to tell you about my daughter, Katrina, because I always want to talk about Katrina, so I have a captive audience. She has a wicked, quick sense of humor. She likes animals more than she likes most people. She says they're more honest. She is both my mentor and my mentee. She has permission to challenge me, and she's happy to oblige. She is 27 years old, and she's married to her best friend, Josh. And they're having a baby! I'm so excited! A little girl, and the baby is due on 10/10/11. The year is 2011. And that summer, I had the great good fortune to be staying on family property along the Arkansas River in Howard, Colorado. My husband and I lived in Park City. Katrina and Josh, they live north of Denver, so on the Front Range. And it was a great fortune because it was a beautiful summer. The meadow was lush, and the river was running high, and I was only 3 hours from Katrina and Josh. So that summer, I went a couple of times on the weekends. I went for one weekend to sit with her. She wasn't feeling well. And one weekend for a baby shower. So the first part of August, we returned back to Park City, awaiting the birth of this baby. And on August 16th of 2011, I was hiking with friends up above Park City. And I called Katrina at lunch because she wasn't feeling very well. And she said Josh was on his way home to take her to the doctor. So I get home, and the phone rings, and it's my sister, who also lives in the Denver area. And she says that Katrina has collapsed and is being airlifted to the hospital. Shock, awe, panic, what do I do next? I'm, 8 hours away, this isn't quick. And a little while later, I got a second phone call from my sister, and all she said was, "I'm so sorry." Katrina, my only biological child, carrying her first child, had died, and the baby. So, the unborn baby, right? So we pack up and we come back to Denver to be with family. And the next morning, the sun came up, and I didn't understand. My world had stopped, and I didn't know how to take the next step or what the next thing was. Later that day, I received a call from the coroner. I'm going to do this part fast because I hate it. They discovered that Katrina had colon cancer, and the tumor had ruptured her colon and flooded their systems with poison. Her physicians had attributed all of the symptoms to her pregnancy and completely missed the cancer. A couple of weeks later, we returned to Park City. Again, I don't know what to do. My future is gone. So I found a resource. One of the women who I was hiking with that day was a grief coach, which I didn't know before. And Dorothy and I spent a lot of time together in that first year. One day she said to me, we do this walk and talk and whatever worked. One day she said to me, "I have only witnessed a couple of people stand in the fire like you are." And I look at her and say, tell me more. What is standing in the fire? Because I don't know what I'm doing. And she gave me some nebulous answer. And I spent the next 11 years trying to understand what that meant to me. At first, I was this hollow shell of a person holding anger and confusion and sorrow. And I was afraid that if I hung on to those things, they would become part of my tissue, that I would hold them forever. And I gave them oxygen. I tried to release them, I emoted, I didn't know how else to do it. And then I came to envision this standing in the fire as a beautiful mountain forest with big trees that support and protect me from heavy snows and those gale force winds of grief and sorrow. And when a fire strikes that forest, it leaves scars. It leaves blackened tree trunks, some trees standing, some dead. And when it strikes a home, it takes all of the artifacts and facsimiles of a life, and they're gone. All that remains is the foundation, the concrete, the earth that holds it, and that lone standing fireplace. And that was me. I'm down to my foundation. And in that fire went my life in Park City and my marriage. The one thing a forest fire also does is leaves enriched soil. In that first year, another kind of, while I'm walking in the fire or whatever I'm doing, I'm also starting to see repeating numbers, mostly ones. I'm cooking and I look up and it's 11:11. I'm driving down the freeway, the next exit is mine, 111. I look down and the license plate in front of me is 111. You know, I started thinking that my brain was looking for these patterns because I still believe in science, right? But that didn't feel true. So what do when you want to know? You Google it. I Googled it. I find websites, Awakening 1111, portals, all kinds of stuff. But the one thing I found that kind of settled is a book called Angel Numbers. And in that book, number 1 means whatever you're holding is coming to you. So think good thoughts. And when I see 11:11, it's coming at 4 times the speed. Now, do I want 4 times the amount of pain that I'm feeling right now? And then I knew I had a choice. I would see the number 11 and I would think, what do I want? Quick, think it because it's going to change. The clock's going to 11:12. And I would think, I want movement. I want joy. I want true connection. I want to live a life worth living. So over time, I think those things came to me. And I still see ones, you guys, like, I'm serious, right before this event, the ones are like overwhelming. It's like, yeah, okay, you're here, I got it. And what do I want? I want to have fun. So I want you to take note in this story how many ones there are. I mean, I didn't plan 2011. I didn't plan 10, 10, 11. And the thing that really struck me this time is it's been 11 years. So through this process, I have received many gifts. You know, the gift of compassion and empathy, of learning not to judge, trying not to judge, of living in the moment. And I would give back every one of those in a heartbeat to have those 2 girls on the planet. Not my choice. So my work, my choice, is to accept those gifts. So when you see me around town, I'm getting me what you think is the peace sign? 11, 11 out.
Truly amazing story. Made me cry. Give it up. The next one is The Final Slice by Keith Goshall, telling us about a backpacking trip to Wyoming and how he learned that the universe does provide.
Though I know that law and order must prevail. Oh, if and when the laws of man is not just equal and fair, then the laws of nature will come and Redefining.
So it was 1980. I was 18 years old, living in Indiana. And though Indiana is a great place to come from, I was ready for adventure. So myself and another kid from the neighborhood came up with this kind of crazy plan, and we put our bicycles on top of his parents' Cadillac, and we took the long, smooth drive to Albuquerque. And we went to a family wedding there, and after that was done, this kid, Tony, and I rode our bicycles from Albuquerque up to my aunt and uncle's place in Littleton. I'd never done anything like that. It was a pretty good adventure, good start. The rest of the adventure was we were going to then hitchhike to Wyoming, we're going to come back to Denver, and then ride back home to Indiana. Pretty good adventure. But when we got to Denver, my friend Tony, for some odd reason, wanted to go ride to Nebraska and see a friend of his. Now, I didn't know this friend, and I saw no good reason for me to go to Nebraska. So I stuck with the plan. Goodbye, Tony. I traded my bicycle for a backpack that I had shipped UPS to my aunt and uncle's house, and I hitchhiked to the Wind River Range in Wyoming. Now, I was pretty lucky. The last ride I got was with a Forest Service vehicle, and they were dropping off some workers to work on a trail or something, so they got me really deep into the mountains. And I get out of the truck, and they go bumbling along, and here I am, a kid from Indiana, in the middle of this vast, rugged wilderness, and realized I had left my maps in that truck. And it was long gone, and I didn't know where they were going. So I kind of had to make a decision, and it seemed like a bad idea to go without maps, but it wasn't a big enough deterrent. I decided I'd studied the maps well enough, and I just kind of hoped that the universe would provide. So off I went. Now, I didn't meet people every day. Maybe it was every other day. But I'd see them along the trail, and I'd say, hey, how's it going? Hey, can I look at your maps? And kind of quizzically, they'd pass them over, and I'd study them. I'd get my bearings. I'd kind of see where I needed to go for the next day, maybe 2 days, and off I'd go. And that all went pretty well. I did run into a group that was kind of had a camp that was fixed. It was a set camp. And this was a group of hoods in the woods. And, I didn't really know what that was, but I kind of just walked up and said hello. I was actually after their maps. But one of the counselors came up and he said, hey, it's cool if you want to stay with us for the night. In fact, I encourage that, but you don't have any drugs, do you? I'm like, yeah, I'm all out. No, of course not. So I stay with them, and I was getting lonely, so this was great. There was, maybe a dozen kids from the inner city who had been brought there for some sort of outdoor retreat, And they sat around, they were kind of telling their stories. And I noticed they were passing this enormous, it looked like a bucket of chocolate pudding. It was this big gallon can. And as teenagers do, they were complaining about it the whole time. Oh, this tastes like shit. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Who would bring a gallon of chocolate pudding into the backcountry? Well, clearly a horse did. Nobody would backpack with that. So it made it around to me, and they were all very generous in saying, oh my God, eat all of it. We hate that crap. Ate it all up. It was delicious. And, you know, the universe provided. It was just great. I had a wonderful time in the morning. I checked on their maps, and off I went down the trail. So it was a couple days after that I had to go over this pass, and on the map I had seen this very faint little dotted line of a trail and kind of spied this low saddle, and I knew that's where I wanted to go. As it turns out, it really wasn't a trail. I do not know why there was a dotted line there, and it was really quite dangerous to do, but I was an 18-year-old kid. I didn't know any better. So I did make it, and I dropped into the Cirque of the Towers, which is a very grand name, isn't it? But it's well worth the name. This place is like this big horseshoe of the most rugged spires you can imagine. Absolutely jagged and rugged, and I mean the Wind River Range in itself is made up of granite spires, and it's not rounded, it's all sharp, cut, very, very aggressive. And the peaks were named things like War Bonnet and Warrior, Shark's Nose, Wolf's Head. And standing out from this horseshoe was this big tooth of granite called Pingora. And I was just in heaven. I mean, it was the coolest place to be hanging out. And I stayed there for a few days, and I met some climbers there, checked out their maps, and saw that it was about a day's walk out, and then I would have to hitchhike. So I stayed there until the food was running really low, and out I went. I was pretty lucky with getting rides, and I ended up in Lander sort of midday. And I stopped in at the Knowles headquarters because the National Outdoor Leadership School kind of has their headquarters there. And that was a place you could get a shower. And they were very used to backpackers coming in, and so it was a good place to kind of land. And then walked myself to the grocery store, and I got dinner for the night. I'd been running out of food. I was pretty lean. And backpacking in such a way that I didn't want to take extra food, weighs too much. And I'm a solo backpacker, so I have to carry everything. I didn't have a tent, but the tarp. I have to carry the stove and the cooking gear, all the stuff. So you don't want to have too much extra weight. So by the time I get there, I'm out of food. I get to the store and I buy dinner for that night. In the morning, I'm expecting to hitchhike back to Littleton to go see my aunt and uncle. So I'm in the town park, and I've already eaten. I've got my tarp set up and my pack kind of stowed. And at this time of day, all these families start coming into the town park, and they're starting to barbecue and grill. And there's definitely barbecue chicken somewhere over there. Someone's cooking steak, there's hamburgers, there's hot dogs. I can smell it on the air. I can hear bags of chips opening. It's driving me nuts. So I decided I just got to remove myself from that environment. And I go for a walk down the streets of Lander. And over the main street, I see a banner that says that there's a rodeo coming in a couple of days. Well, I don't really pay attention to that because I'll be gone the next morning. But as I get to that banner, I kind of look to the right, and on a side street, there is a sea of white cowboy hats, this huge crowd. The street is blocked off in the middle by a big stage. And there's a guy on stage, and there's kind of some music playing. And I have no idea what it is. So I kind of walk up to the back of the crowd and, what's going on? And I see the man with the microphone up on the stage, and he's saying, "We need one more contestant for the pizza eating contest." the overly enthusiastic young man in the back. Come on up here. So I elbow my way through. You gotta remember, I'm kind of a shy 18-year-old kid. I'd been out in the mountains for weeks. I've been on the road doing a bicycle tour for a couple of weeks. I have this frizzy blonde afro. And I get up on stage and I'm surrounded by these cowboys. Okay, you know, shyness never got me anything, so I'm just gonna go ahead and be here. And I notice that there's a pizza box in front of all of us. There's 5 of us up there. And the guy with the microphone is saying all the rules that are gonna happen. This is how it's gonna happen. And when the last bit of pizza goes in your mouth, throw your hand up and you've won $50. What? $50 on top of it? I could not believe it. I mean, the universe provides, but come on, a pizza party? Too good. So I feel like my chances are pretty good, you know? He says go, and we all tear into our pizza. And as soon as I opened that lid, it was the most beautiful pizza I had ever seen. That cheese was just browned perfectly. The crust wasn't too big. The pepperoni had formed into little cups. And they held a thin layer of grease in the bottom, and the top layer was just a little bit burned. It was perfect. And we all grab that first slice and we stuff it in our mouth and we're chewing. And it's halfway through that first piece that I then realized I am not going to win. This was such a gift. A 16-inch pepperoni pizza was literally my wish that had come down to me. And I was not going to waste it by stuffing it in my mouth, trying to win this prize. I was going to enjoy every bit of it. So I slowed down. And the crowd is going nuts, right? They're cheering us all on. Some of them see what's going on and they're pointing at me and laughing harder. That dude's not even trying. Look at him. And I'm just, oh, it's so good. Bite after bite. I'm maybe halfway through my pizza and somebody wins. Okay, I knew I wasn't going to win at this point, but I just felt like, you know, the universe provided, but don't get greedy. And so it's the end, everybody's kind of leaving. I look at the MC, and it's this kind of unspoken thing between us. He can tell I'm saying, "Can I have that pizza?" And he's saying, "Yes, you can take it." I don't think he was that impressed that I didn't try to win, but I fold it up and I'm kind of tucking it under my arm and heading down the steps of the stage. When the MC starts up with, and the next thing up is the beer drinking contest. And I look over my shoulder, and again, no words passed between us, but he pointed. Get out of here. Fair enough. So as I head down the steps and I'm heading back to the town park with half a pizza still and half a pizza in my belly, I know that I came in dead last, but I was walking away a winner. Thanks, guys.
Last but certainly not least, Ellie Roque with Solid 2, telling her story of how sometimes beauty is found where you least expect it.
Hi, everyone. So I'm 5'10", exactly, without shoes. I'm probably 6'3" tonight. And believe it or not, my grandmother is 4'8". On a good day, she's 4'8". And I always wanted to model as a kid. That's all I wanted to do. It consumed my every thought. And I got my big break when I was 16. Now, the year is 1995, so 5'10" happens to be the perfect height for modeling. I'm in luck. And I was a hostess at a seafood restaurant, because that's what you do when you're 16 and you want to make tips. And in walked this guy and this girl. And the guy, the only way to describe him is like one of these guys who just spent a little too long in the 80s. Do you know what I mean? Okay, I don't know if this is accurate. I do know most of this is accurate, but I don't know if all of this is accurate, but this is how I remember it. He was wearing a black leather jacket with fringe. That he was wearing. I distinctly remember that jacket because I wanted it. And he was wearing black leather pants, and he had long hair and black charcoal eyeliner right there, smudged. Stuck in the 80s a little too long. And he walked in with this girl who was stunning. 5'11", I'm sure. And on a scale of 1 to 12, 12 plus, plus, plus. Blonde, beautiful hair. She had, in my mind, she had skinny jeans, but it was 1995, so I don't think they were skinny jeans. But in my mind, they were skinny jeans, and her thighs were thin. Perfect for a model. 12 plus, plus. And I remember I found it odd that the guy came and talked to me, but he did. And he asked me how tall I was and how old I was. And so the next day, I was going to do a test shoot. For those of you guys that don't know what a test shoot is, it's when they think you're pretty in person and they think you're like an 11 on a scale of 1 to 12. But they need to be sure that you actually look good in pictures. Because sometimes you could be 11 in person and like an 8 in photos. Does that make sense? So I did my test shoot, I passed, and I got to model. When I graduated high school, the very next day, I was on a plane to Miami to do a photo shoot. And during this time, I quickly realized that I wanted to be like the guy that scouted me. I wanted to be the one to pick the models. I wanted to be the one to be able to tell you if you could model, or if you could model, or if you couldn't. And so I opened my own modeling business, and I saw thousands of girls, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of young girls that all wanted to model. They wanted to know if I thought that they were beautiful. I would go to New York and LA and Milan. And in the modeling world, we rate models on a scale of 1 to 12, like I said. And I would get to tell girls if they could or they couldn't. I'm sorry you have too much acne. It's going to scar. You're an 8. I'm sorry, but your thighs are too thick. We need them to be a 35. They're a 42. You have too much cellulite. You're not tall enough. Maybe you should consider acting. You're too old. I know you're only 24, but that's too old to model. Sometimes, if I were in a big group, maybe 100 people, 100 girls, all wanting to see if I thought they were beautiful, if I thought they were an 11 or 12, because I'm only looking for 11s and 12s. And they would sit there in an audience just like you, on their best behavior. And their mothers and fathers and grandmothers that would bring them in would treat me like a god. Sometimes in that big group, I needed to find the 11s and 12s quickly, so I would have everyone stand up. If you would like to model, stand up. And I would scan intentionally, making eye contact, looking for 11s and 12s. And I would say, if you're not 5'9" or taller, have a seat. Models are 5'9" or taller. And then most of the audience would sit down. There would maybe be 4, 5, 6 girls still standing. And this is where I'd get them, because I need to look for the 11 and 12s. If you're not a size 4 or smaller, have a seat. You're too big. And they would. And maybe, if I was lucky, I would have 1 or 2 girls that were an 11 or 12, and sometimes, a phrase I said very often, I would say, yes, she's tall and she's thin, but I'm not a plastic surgeon. We need symmetrical faces. And despite my travels to New York and Milan and LA, I always made time to visit my 4'8" grandmother. My 4'8" grandmother, her name was Aurora, like the princess. And I'd always make time to go visit her, and she lived on our family land that has been in my family for generations and generations. The home that she lived in was built in the 1800s by my ancestors. It has 2 feet thick walls of stone. I know they're 2 feet thick because I tried to install fiber internet there. I did get it. And when I get to my grandmother's house, I would have to pass by our family cemetery that goes back to the 1700s, where I can visit my great-grandmother and my great-great-grandmother and my great-great-grandmother. This is my great-grandmother's. And when I would go to my grandmother, because she'd be excited because I'd come back from a travel and visit her, and she would greet me unlike I've ever been greeted before or since. She wouldn't shake my hand or hug me. She would grab both sides of my face and just connect with me, eye to eye. She died during the monarch butterfly migration. The monarchs fly right over our family land on their migration to Mexico every year. There were butterflies everywhere, and my family, it did what we always do. When someone dies, we buried our dead. My spiritual leader cousin came and did the service. My Broadway singing brother came from New York to sing. And I, having done hundreds of photo shoots, did the hair and makeup on my dead grandmother. And when I showed up at the mortuary with my hair and makeup kit in hand, I thought, I always did her hair and makeup when she was alive. Why wouldn't I do it when she's died? And as the attendant brought me to the room where she was and let me know that she had been freshly bathed and she was ready for her hair and makeup, I went in and I saw her on a steel slab, lying there with her aged skin and her white hair. And they put spotlights on you when you die and they're embalming you. And when I looked at her and saw her 4'8" frame, all wrinkled and gray, I thought, she was so beautiful. And that's when I heard her whisper, "What number would you give me?" Solid 2. And that's when I knew I would never define beauty that way again. I was wrong. Now, when I see someone color their gray hair, I think you covered up the pretty part. When I see someone remove a wrinkle, I think, I liked that wrinkle there. I liked the story it told. And when I look in the mirror and I see a new gray hair on my head, and maybe a little less hair than I'd like, I feel like it's a slow introduction to the old lady that I one day will become. And I don't know who that lady will be, but what I do know is that she will be beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you to all the storytellers tonight. Everything was wonderful, and much obliged to everyone who came out tonight. Thank you very much.